You're very welcome back. Today, October 18th, marks International Menopause Day, a day dedicated to raising awareness for menopause and the supports which can improve a person's health and well-being.
We're joined now by GP and women's health specialist Dr. Kiva Hartley, sex therapist Audrey Casey and menopause workplace consultant Catherine O'Keefe. You're very welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Morning.
I feel in recent years we've gotten better about talking about menopause. There's more awareness, but why is it so important to have a special day designated to speaking about menopause? Catherine, I may start with you.
I think it's all about, whilst we've made, huge progress, we still have a lot of work to do, and unfortunately we know there's still women that are suffering in silence, and I think really days like today are just another opportunity to get the awareness out there, to get the conversations growing, and it's also just for women to feel it's okay to talk about menopause and that it's really all about support over silence. And I think, these days are very important. And as we know, it's kind of more nearly a month at this stage, but it's all very important to support women.
Quiva, when we look at the changes that have been made over the years when it comes to dealing with it, for some women, they sail through menopause. In fairness, it doesn't affect them too badly. I have 5 sisters, some of them are grand, but some of them, like me, suffered horrifically. Yeah. And there are awful symptoms associated with it that can be masked for something else, particularly if you go through it early. What are the main ones that are the most, damaging to a daily life for a woman?
So it's highly individual, as you've pointed out. I think you can split it into perimenopause when women are still having periods, but their hormonal production has changed. Typically, although I'm generalising, that's from about 45 onwards, but it depends on the person. And then there's menopause, which is your final period. And then if you go a year with no bleeding, at that point, then you are postmenopausal. And these different stages have different symptoms. Most women, when they're perimenopausal, talk about mood and emotional symptoms. Things like irritability, anxiety, low mood can be really common. This is a time when a lot of women actually start getting hot flushes and night sweats that we so commonly associate with menopause. And then there's other physical symptoms like dry skin and dry hair or hair thinning, joint aches and pains, and vulvovaginal symptoms like vaginal dryness, painful sex, bladder symptoms. It really depends on the person, unfortunately. Yeah.
So you mentioned there painful sex. Audrey, you're a sex therapist. What changes can someone expect during the menopause to their sex drive or their sex life?
What I find, I suppose, with clients that are coming into me specifically when it's, issues around desire and libido associated with menopause is that they feel that their desire has just dropped off a cliff. And whereas they would have had, spontaneous desire, even receptive desire to their partner and, whatever they were having whenever they were having sex, whether it was weekly or monthly, it's just they don't feel like they want it at all. And there's a lot of grief and loss in that, and then there's guilt for their partner, and then there's there's soreness, as Quiva mentioned, that because of dryness, and it's a very emotional time. And because they're exhausted as well, they might not be sleeping. They're coming to me and they're saying, is it gone forever? Am I ever going to feel desire again? And I'm so tired, I don't even want to, but it's not there. Is it coming back? So it's a very emotional time for women.
On the flip side of that as well, when you're in perimenopause, I suppose your hormones are trying to rev up your ovaries, so you can get the opposite of that as well when you have your sex drive goes through the roof. Absolutely. And people don't talk about that enough either, because it is a symptom as well. It's not just the opposite end of it.
Absolutely, and I do find that we tend to focus on the negatives and the how do we help situations if there is issues. But I think that women in their 50s are sometimes having the best sex of their lives.
Yeah,
and we don't.
It's not all bad.
Yes,
the hormones are all over the place, but it's not all bad.
There's less chance of pregnancy, obviously, that goes out the window, and then you don't have to deal with a period. So there's definitely positives.
But when we look at a cohort of women, though, when it comes to women in work, and I was speaking to an eminent professor recently in women's health, and she told me the biggest fall off for women and highly skilled women in the workplace are in their 50s, because they're just, this is too much, I am not bothered, I'm going through so many physical symptoms, my job is too much pressure. There's no understanding, little if no understanding, despite what's happened in recent years with awareness, because it's not talked about enough, it's not appreciated enough. So a lot of women are going, just fuck this, I'm off, I'm out of here, why bother? And that's a real issue.
Huge issue, and I think we know that 96% of women, want support in the workplace, and they want that it's more than a menopause policy. And I would find with, the workplaces I've worked with, so many of the female staff will say, you know, they feel seen, they feel heard. And I mean, that's a major plus for any employer once you start opening the conversation on menopause, because that is what women want. They want to be heard. They want to be understood that brain fog or anxiety is really causing a challenge to their working day. And, you know, the big impact I see there is the impact on self-esteem and confidence. So we've got to remember that, like menopause, it is a chapter. And as you say, there are good points to it as well, Elaine. And I think as employers, it's supporting women through that chapter because, you know, we want to stay in our jobs. We're the fastest growing demographic in the workplace. So it's really important that employers are part of this conversation and are supporting female staff and also managers, so that managers are equipped to have conversations about menopause.
Okay, and hopefully we'll see an improvement in that. Kiva, I might come back to you and talk about maybe some of the treatments. So the term HRT, I think there's a bit of confusion. There can be a lot of discourse around it. Are there any areas in particular that can be a source of misinformation on HRT?
Oh, there's lots of misinformation about hormone therapy. How long do you have? So
About 4 minutes.
no pressure. Speak really quickly. So HRT is hormone replacement therapy. And in a nutshell, it's estrogen is what we want to replace. So that's the hormone that makes you feel better primarily. And there's different ways of taking estrogen. You can take it through your skin. People have probably heard of the patches. There's gels, there's a spray, or you can take it by mouth as a tablet. They carry slightly different risks. So there's different ways of doing that. And then we give another hormone called progestogen if women have a womb intact. So if you haven't had a hysterectomy. So the progestin is there to protect your womb from estrogen. So that's where it gets confusing, is because there's different types, different ways, different brands, different products. And what suits one person won't suit the next. There's an awful lot of individuality and trial and error.
Is HRT suitable for every woman though? Because some people should not ever take HRT.
Yeah, HRT is suitable for almost everyone. Like there's definitely caveats to that. And there's women, for example, women who've had a history of a hormone-dependent cancer, like certain types of breast cancer. In fact, any breast cancer, really, we would try to avoid HRT if we can. So there's some medical conditions where we're not keen to prescribe HRT. We look at non-hormonal alternatives. We've excellent alternatives. We've medications without HRT, without hormones in them, that can treat some of these menopausal symptoms. But the majority of women can take HRT and can have that discussion with their provider.
Can do it safely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one of the misconceptions. You'd asked about misinformation. Things like breast cancer, there is a small increased risk of breast cancer. It's about putting it in context. It's about talking about the benefits too and looking at that as an individual.
And HRT is to become free from January. So how do you feel about this?
I mean, I'm delighted. Anything that removes barriers to
Accessing
accessing anything.
It cost me a fortune.
So, that should be across the board in women's health. Anything that removes a barrier to accessing something that is beneficial for your health and treats symptoms and makes people feel better, then, fantastic, great. I suppose we need a bit more detail and we need more information about what's actually going to happen, but no, I welcome it, yeah.
But there are some issues as well. I know with me, I was in an awful state before I started. I had menopause in my early 30s. We've talked about this before on the show. But there's health reasons. It's not just for the feeling better, for the want of a better phrase. I mean, if you get a premature menopause, it can have impacts for your bone health.
Absolutely,
osteoporosis, arthritis, osteopenia in later life. So for someone like me, for example, if I didn't go on HRT, I'd have brittle bones by now, to be quite honest. So it's not just about the mood swings and the hot flushes. It can have a real proper effect on your physical health and your quality of life and your longevity going forward.
Particularly younger women, as you say. So if you stop having periods under 45, that has a consequence for your health. And HRT is fabulous at treating those consequences and reducing the risk of bone density loss, reducing cardiovascular risk, and essentially kind of bringing those risks back to normal as if your periods hadn't stopped. So definitely benefits there.
And Audrey, I suppose when we look at the ramifications on relationships as well, and particularly if the sex is out the window basically, and it's the time of life when women are busy, they've got kids, school runs, everything else, hormones are all over the place, and the last thing you want to do is have a bit of slap and tickle in the bedroom basically. So men really have to be brought into the conversation here as well.
Absolutely. I was just about to say that the most successful outcomes is when the partner attends as well. So often women will come initially and they'll talk about the symptoms they're having and how their libido has dropped, and they feel a lot of pressure to fix it alone. And you feel alone anyway because your body is changing. So I always actually ask them to invite their partner along. And as soon as that happens and their partner is in the room, and we're discussing, you know, how sex has been and how it's changed and what they would like it to be, there's much more of a connection and the communication lines are open and there's much more support. And then we can talk about a blueprint and we can talk about a plan going forward where, you know, to minimise the risk of any kind of painful sex, because nobody wants that. And initially, I would say even take, you know, intercourse and orgasm off the table as a goal, and let's talk about like how your body has changed and, you know, what feels good now and what feels like it's building arousal. And look, we make a whole new blueprint, which is why, you know, a lot of people end up having the best sex of their lives.
I guess we could talk about this all day.
We could.
We're running out of time, but thank you all so much for joining us on the show this morning.
For more information on the topics discussed today, check out hse.ie/conditions/menopause.
After the break, I'll be sitting down with a woman living with the skin condition EB who is set, wait for it, to the Dublin Marathon with her good mate Colin Farrell. See you in 3.